So research actually shows that it's not about, if we eliminated certain foods, we find it actually more beneficial if we replace with what we're replacing them with. Right. So one of the biggest things, right, is saturated fat, and specifically red meat and processed meats. We know that that puts a lot of strain on the kidneys, but it also has a lot of saturated fat. And also, even if you had 100% lean beef, or you had 99% lean beef, or you had venison, or you had the leanest red meat, we know that when that's consumed, our gut microbiome makes a byproduct called TMAO that promotes plaque formation in the arteries at a much higher and accelerated speed. So we know we need to reduce that as much as possible or abstain from it depending on what's realistic for you. But what we also see is when we replace it with things that are more like plant-based protein or even omega-3 rich fish, which is unsaturated fat, that actually has been shown to have a positive effect. When we consume plant-based protein, whether it's tofu or beans or legumes, our gut bacteria creates butyrate. And butyrate reduces the arterial stiffness in our arteries. And so that allows for a better endothelial and blood vessel function. And when we have better blood vessel health and endothelial function, we're also allowing for better blood flow. If you have better blood flow, your kidneys are going to do its job better. So is your heart, so is your brain, so is your whole entire body will work better if you have better blood flow, right? Everything is getting the oxygen and the blood supply it needs to thrive. And so that is a big swap. And then, of course, vegetables and fruits are important, but in the way that I work, in the way that I talk in my group programs and in my individual programs, I like to group certain vegetables into certain different categories. So because we've seen that in our bodies, we have so many different pathways, and we want to optimize each and every one of them along the way to optimize heart health. So for an example, we have a lot in heart disease and in people who have high cholesterol or who have high CAC scores, who have a lot of plaque in their arteries, their cholesterol and the fatty material has become oxidized into plaque. And so when we have heightened levels of oxidative stress, that can cause the promotion of plaque even more. And oxidative stress can happen from so many things, from being sedentary to over-exercising to using dry, high-temperature cooking to, there's so many different things. Certain foods can promote oxidative stress. But what we have to also do is boost the antioxidant guru pathway that's going to help to quench these free radicals and reduce that oxidation process. And so one of those groups of vegetables that help with that are sulfur-containing vegetables. So these are things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, garlic, shallots, leeks, and selenium. So we need certain micronutrients for these pathways to work. And that's really where I kind of hone in from a heart health perspective, because we need to make sure we're getting those nutrients, and certain foods have more of it than others. Just like how you mentioned with kidney health, like there's a whole spectrum of potassium. Some people need to be on a higher potassium restriction than others. And so each vegetable, there are different vegetables that are going to be higher in potassium than others. And so that's kind of how my focus is also in heart health, because there's so many pathways that help to assist with vasodilation, opening of the arteries, helping to allow for us to remove the cholesterol as well. And so we need a lot of different nutrients. We also don't realize that in order for your heart to beat regularly, you need magnesium, potassium, calcium, and those have cofactors as well. So there's so many nutrients that we need in order for our bodies to work. So we need to focus on what to add into the diet, not really what we need to get rid of. Yes, we need to avoid certain things because it puts more pressure on our heart, puts more pressure on our kidneys. But when we flip the switch and say, well, these are all the things we want to add, it also makes us more excited, and if we know how to cook with them, right? And that's really the support that professionals can provide by helping you get those into your diet, whether you cook or you eat at restaurants or you are someone who just stops by and grabs and goes. We need to make sure that you're getting those nutrients to protect your body and your heart and your kidneys.
Yeah. And that's so important too. I mean, the potassium, and I saw someone had made a comment too about potassium, is just always reinforcing with, because it comes up so much with kidney disease and kidney health, is that potassium needs for people with kidney disease is individualized. And we know for many different reasons that potassium is beneficial for our overall health and our heart health, and can help lower blood pressure. And like you mentioned, some of those cruciferous vegetables and our broccoli and cauliflower, like some of those can be more moderate or maybe moderate to high potassium vegetables. And so it comes down to first knowing, do you need to even restrict your potassium? Because when you go online, you find out you have kidney disease, and then you Google, and then it's like you need to follow. And I've talked to people who are like, I've cut all potassium out of my diet. And it's like, well, first of all, you couldn't eat then. But ultimately, there's a difference between low potassium and moderate and high, and people with kidney disease need different levels. But the goal is that we can get those beneficial antioxidants and whole plant foods and fiber and micronutrients in your diet with the potassium needs that you have. And even amongst those veggies that you were mentioning, I mean, in the cruciferous veggie realm, cauliflower is a little less potassium than broccoli, and broccoli is less potassium than Brussels sprouts, but cabbage and arugula and asparagus are going to be lower potassium than all of those other ones, and garlic and onions are all lower potassium. So there's still lots of ways and lots of options for these high antioxidant foods within a lower or moderate potassium diet too.
Love that. And I also think it's important to mention that there's no such thing, and you don't want a no potassium diet. You need potassium. It's just a certain amount at a time your kidneys might not be able to process. And one of the things that drives me bonkers, and I guess this is just all the time, I guess a lot of things drive me bananas, but the first thing that someone probably comes to tell you is like, okay, I was diagnosed with kidney disease. My doctor told me not to have any salt, like no salt, no potassium, all these things. When people come to me, they're like, all my doctor told me for heart failure is low sodium, when there's so much more. Or I have high blood pressure, they just told me to have no sodium, and I don't even put that much sodium. But what people don't get taught, and this is super important, is in your body, potassium and sodium work together. They work in tandem. If you cut out salt and you cut out no potassium, you actually can cause a lot more vasoconstriction in your arteries that can lead to heart disease. And so we need to make sure that we are looking at the whole picture and not eliminating potassium. We need to make sure that we are having the right amount that your body can process based off of your levels, and make that a personalized choice. But that does not mean to cut out all potassium. And I think that that is something that most people are very frightened about, because it's scary if you have high potassium levels. You obviously don't want it to go higher. It can lead to cardiac arrhythmias. It can lead to a lot of detrimental effects. But we need to make sure that we're doing it the appropriate way, and knowing your labs, knowing what's triggering to you. I mean, I also found that, you have this podcast that's awesome with the nephrologist, mm-hmm. and you talked about, I watched a part of one of the episodes, and it was saying how the nephrologist was mentioning how your potassium could be high because of a poor blood draw. Your potassium could be high from like a one-time incident of something that went wrong in the lab. So we need and what's going on with you particularly to provide that personalization without cutting out and being over restrictive.
Yeah. And the thing too is fruits and veggies and certain plant foods are oftentimes blamed for being like, oh, well, those are high potassium, let's cut them out. But a lot of animal products contain, or cheese and dairy and meats and stuff, they can be high in potassium as well. And so it's not this free for all of all you eat is white rice and meat, that you're not going to get a high potassium diet. There could be potassium additives in food, and there could be just those animal products that have high amounts. So again, I know this is just something like it's easy for us to talk about it, and I think for people to understand it and implement, that's where, ideally having that support from a dietitian to help you with that and maneuver that. But someone asked to, they just said, as being like a worn out dialysis patient, easy to cook meals are key. That way, and they asked for any practical suggestions. And I mean, at least and I'll let you answer this too, but utilize frozen veggies and frozen produce for convenience. I mean, you can stir fry them, you can microwave them, you can saute them, you can roast them in the oven, you can add your seasonings to it and make them taste good. But there's nothing wrong with using some of these more convenience foods that don't have, you can add your own seasonings to it, and that's totally fine to do. Everything doesn't have to be fresh and prepared and take 30 minutes or 60 minutes every single time you eat. You can use things like that for ease.
I love hacks. Hacks are my best friend. I don't know about you, but I work in only like in the kitchen in like 15 to 20-minute increments. I have three little kids at home, and so like it's their attention span to cut a mushroom while I'm like trying to get a lot of other things in the oven. So I love using convenience items, but I also like doing a lot of batch work when I have a little bit of extra time. So one of my things, which people probably think I'm crazy to share this, but I'll share it anyway, is once a month or once every 2 months, I would say, I get like 3 onions, 2 leeks, a bunch of garlic, and I literally spend time just chop it all up. I put it in a freezer bag in the freezer, and then whenever I need it, whether it's a stir fry or I'm making like burgers or whatever I'm making, I just stick it in there, and I have my alien vegetables, which are so cardioprotective. I also have a lot of flavor, super easy for soups, and I only need to do it once. So I'll give myself that 15 to 20-minute block and just chop a bunch of those, and it adds so much flavor without adding a lot of different types of additives to it. And I think we don't utilize them because sometimes they're a pain in the butt to actually chop. Like no one likes chopping onions. I've never, exactly. I make my husband actually chop the onions, but
Yeah.
I'll do the leeks, I'll do the garlic, and it's so nice because I can just scoop. I use that all the time, and it's my savior.
Yeah. No, that's quick and easy. Another thing too, and speaking of the batch cooking, is even some of your like whole grains or legumes, if you're cooking those, I mean, it can take, right? Like white rice cooks really quickly, but if you want to have barley or farro or brown rice, then it's more fiber and it's going to take longer. It could take 30 minutes, it could take 50 minutes to cook. So do it once or twice a week. Cook it in bulk. You can freeze those things. You can store it for, 3 to 5 days. And then all you have to do when you think of your meal is you're like, okay, I already have this made. I just need to worry, like maybe you just worry about your vegetables. Oh, cool, I have frozen ones because I don't feel like chopping anything fresh. And there you go. So I think it's important. We have busy, fast lives. Make it as simple as you can and repurpose ingredients too. So if you have leftover, like I don't know, let's say you made like a pasta and you have all these like pasta noodles and you just have the leftover noodles. Well, you can turn it into like a veggie pasta salad and make a dressing for it. It doesn't have to be like I'm eating the same leftovers every day and now it's boring. You can repurpose those things that you've cooked in bulk. And I think things like stir fries and salads and soups and bowls and some of those like sheet pan dinner, like throw everything on one pan.
Love the easy.
Those make things easy, but yeah, I mean, we're not chefs ourselves, and so
I think it's all about being creative in the kitchen. One of the things I love to do is I've always hated salads. Okay, confession time. I hate salads. But I realized the reason why I hated them was because they were like the same boring thought. Like most of the time you go to someone's house or where I go, I guess, they have salads with like tomatoes and cucumbers and like that's it. Like that's boring. So I've been doing a lot of creative kinds of different things. So like for instance, tonight I bought bulbs of fennel and I had butter lettuce and radicchio bag from Trader Joe's, and I tossed that with my meal prepped green beans. I added my beans, a little bit of fish, and I put it all together and I dressed it. I like took so much mustard, spicy mustard, and I just like put that on top with some olive oil, and I had that. The other night, I'm always trying to be creative with my sauces. Like one time I'll make a peanut sauce, and I find that the flavor enhancers and how you present it to yourself, it can be exciting. It doesn't need to be perfect. Sometimes you'll be like, wow, that really didn't taste the best. Like it would sound better in my head. Yeah. But you test it and you start realizing what flavor profiles you like and how things meld, and you become your own chef in the kitchen. And I think that that's important. We kind of get scared. Like I'm not a recipe follower. I wrote a book and I literally in my group program, I try to follow the recipe so that I can share with them. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't follow a recipe. I've changed this and done this and this. I just can't. So and that's why I don't bake. Like never send me to bake for anything.
out.
I can't, exactly. So I can't follow a recipe. And so maybe that's why I'm also like, I like adding and trying different things. And I feel like sometimes you just need that. Like if you're craving, if I want something chocolatey, like I've made an oatmeal bake and I've tossed in cacao powder in it. And I've done like every week I kind of change things up in my routine so that I don't become bored because I need variety. And it's also important for your gut to get variety, but those small little tweaks really help.
Yeah. And variety too with like different spices and seasonings, because you could have the same exact like bowl of veggies, rice and beans, and you have it with like chili powder and cumin and paprika, and that gives one flavor profile. And then next time you could do it with ginger and coconut aminos and rice vinegar, and now you have this totally different flavor profile.
Exactly.
Or you do curry powder next time, and so it's the same like food technically, but now you've used different seasonings of different cuisines, and then it makes it just taste different and better.
Right. And so flavor is really important for sustainability. So I like all the spices and herbs for flavor, but I also love it for how heart healthy and kidney healthy it is. Like they're so jam-packed with anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. So use your spices and really enjoy them. Enjoy the process. If you need help, reach out to somebody who can help you. I think that that's important. I really believe in a supportive communities, because when you're doing it by yourself, it can be very overwhelming, and it can also be hard and rough of like, am I doing it correct? And so getting that extra guidance can always be helpful too.
Yeah. There is in the question box, let me see, I don't know if you can see that in your, but it said, by what percentage is LDL cholesterol lowered on a plant-based diet? And just whether it's plant-based diet or just any dietary changes, but what do you see as far as like how much someone can lower their cholesterol with food and lifestyle changes?
Yeah, so I don't like to categorize vegan, Mediterranean, keto, because everyone in my practice who's come to see me who are say they're on one of those diets have told me very different ways of the way that they eat. No one has told me so I don't believe there's like a standard, right? So I've seen people who are on a vegan diet who are very heart healthy, and others who are not on a heart healthy diet. So it's hard to categorize based off of these terminology. But in my private practice, in 3 months, I usually see a drop in LDL by about 40 to 60, 65 milligrams per deciliter. And so I do recommend that we do check every 3 to 4 months, just so that we make sure that we're getting to the right goals. Within a year, it can drop tremendously. I've seen a lot of people post heart attack who've dropped it to 16 or 20 milligrams per deciliter and then have to get off their statin because that's just too low. So diet and nutrition has a lot to do with getting rid of that LDL cholesterol. We know that 1 in 4 people die of heart disease, but 80% of that can be prevented through science-based nutrition and lifestyle change. And we dig deeper into the research. Optimizing your lab parameters, and LDL being one of them, is one of the ways we can be very proactive in that change. So super important that we do change it and utilize science-based nutrition to help with that.
Yep, totally agree. And I know we'll have just a couple more minutes, but this was asked by, maybe we'll take 1 or 2 more questions. So one here, and this is something, is tahini safe for kidney patients? And a couple people had asked this. So tahini is used in a lot of like hummus, or it can be used in like dressings. And like you mentioned, like a peanut sauce sometimes can use a tahini in place of that. I've seen it in even like baking recipes with like cookies instead of peanut butter. In general, tahini can definitely be used. There's nothing like toxic about tahini or like sesame seeds. Usually what can come into mind is like potassium and phosphorus and like the volumes that you're using. So with anything, again, check with ideally your dietitian, so you could see for you individually, but there's, if you're using a tablespoon of it to make a sauce or a dressing or something, it's not something you're using in these like insanely high volumes typically, unless there's some sort of dish or use of it that I'm not aware of. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love tahini is great, but like you said, it's all quantities. So a lot of times people will come to me on a no oil and no fat diet, We need fat in order for our cardiovascular system to be optimized. We need it for fat to absorb fat soluble vitamins. We also need it to absorb a large category of antioxidants called carotenoids. And so if you have no fats and no oils, you can actually be very deficient in several essential nutrients. So we need fat. But with that being said, we don't want to be on a high-fat diet. So there's a difference between a half a cup of nuts and half a cup or a quarter cup of tahini versus 2 teaspoons or 1 tablespoon, right? And so quantity matters in terms of these micronutrients and ensuring that we're not going high in saturated fat as well. So that really matters. And it also matters, most times tahini is just sesame paste, but there are some brands that will add additives to it. And that's when it can become very pro-inflammatory. So we need to make sure that it is just sesame seeds and we're having it in the right portion in relation to whatever else we're eating too.
Yeah. And that's something too, the portions of it, especially like, and I think someone had made a comment about this earlier with potassium. And again, potassium comes up, but it's nuts, right? Nuts and seeds and stuff can be higher potassium, but for the calorie and fat and potassium content of it, usually, I mean, you don't want to just eat a handful after handful of nut. There's usually, a standard portion's a quarter cup. And so it does come down to the portion. And a lot of times, even someone on a potassium restricted diet still has flexibility if they're being mindful of their portions and not having very high potassium foods and very high quantities or not paying attention to that. So, so that's important to keep in mind. I mean, we have to wrap up, but do you have any like final thoughts, recommendations, anything for just our kind of overall connecting heart health and kidney health?
I always say, know your numbers and be proactive today to prevent future complications. A lot of times we wait until something happens in order to say, oh, I'm surprised. I didn't think this would happen to me. But if we are proactive, we can really prevent heart attacks, strokes, kidney failure. We can prevent this, but we need to do it very soundly and not think that there's a magic pill and do it very quick. There's no magic pill. It's really about that long-term lifestyle change and making sure that you are optimizing all of your risk factors from your labs to all of the things that are happening in your blood vessel health to blood vessel, that milieu with that area in order to really protect your heart health and your kidney health.
Yep, exactly. And this is recorded. So once we end this live, I'll save it on my page, and there might be a way where you can share it directly to your page, or otherwise I think you can link back. But you guys can watch the replay of it, and hopefully, we'll do this more often if you guys are enjoying it. But thank you for coming on. We're both Michelle. I'm plant-based kidneys. You're Michelle, heart health nutritionist. So you guys can find us on each other's Instagram. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And again, this is American Heart Month was February, which just ended, and the National Kidney Month is March, which we're just beginning. So that's why we wanted to do this and just really reinforce the importance of like education, awareness, prevention, and really that strong connection and link between protecting both your kidneys and your heart.